Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, August 26, 2025, and our friend John Helmer is back with us. Welcome back, John.
Thank you for having me, Nima.
John, let me start with your new book, and you've just published a book in German. Here is the book, and it's about Navalny. And
Yes.
could you elaborate on that? What is this
Well,
book? And go ahead.
just quickly for everybody, we're going to focus in a few minutes on all the perversions of war words. War meaning peace. Trump's peace means war. Uh, Children and pedophilia mean Epstein, but it doesn't mean Gaza. And we're going to talk about the perversion of words in politics in a minute. This is the third of the series of books I've written about the lie, the profound lie about Novichok. And this is written in German because the lie was in German, the lie that Alexei Navalny had been poisoned by Novichok, his life had been saved in a Berlin clinic, and that he was then revived by brilliant German medicine. And the book tells the story of the way in which the German government used Navalny and the Novichok lie to prepare the German people for war against Russia. And its meaning in German, the Navalny-Novichok complex, chronicle of a staging, of a faking, of a fabrication. It's the last of the series because the second one, Long Live Novichok, the British poison that fooled the world, was about the way in which the British government had used the Novichok lie about Russia to pave the war, to prepare public opinion, to dominate the media, that Russia was an evil attacking on British territory. And the first one was the story of the Skripals, the first alleged targets for Russian attack on British soil. So that's what the book's about. I'm afraid for the time being, it's only in German because Germany is right now the center of the rearmament of Europe in a new war against Russia run by the little Chancellor Friedrich Merz. But the crimes of lying and preparing war were Merkel and the BND director Bruno Kahl. Kahl is still the head of the BND, and BND and the Merz regime frighten, terrify, repress German readers, German writers, German media. So there it is for those of us who want to see the end of the Novichok story and the Novichok lie. That's what it's about.
It's right. The name of the book is right below your name.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah. Anybody who wants to buy it, who wants to access that book, they can buy it from Amazon.
Right.
John, let me start with what has happened in Russia, the drone attack on one of the most important Russian oil refineries in the south. And it was reported based on the satellites, what we've seen, the photos from satellites, at least 8 tanks were damaged, 6 of which were completely destroyed, and 2 were partially damaged. Do you think that as time goes by and Donald Trump shows some sort of sign that he's not interested in the war, at least, but Europeans are pushing for the continuation, and Ukraine is doing everything to continue the conflict? They're just throwing anything that they have at Russia. What's going on? Do you think that that Oreshnik moment comes to the mind of Russians to respond?
You said a lot, and it's a lot worth responding to. So let me try to take it piece by piece. There have been 2 major new Ukrainian drone attacks, the one in Saratov in the south, and the one in the north at Ust-Luga, the port near St. Petersburg, which attacked the Novichok gas liquefaction plant. the importance of these attacks is, in the first place, exactly as you said it. It's an attempt by the Ukrainians and the Europeans and the Americans who supply the intelligence, the space satellite targeting, the drone targeting, the fixed wing intelligence gathering that are required for plotting these drone attacks. All of those forces, meaning the United States, is still there fighting the war against Russia. And what they are intended to do is to make it appear that Russia is losing the war, that there are game-changing weapons capable of destroying the Russian offensive, okay, to assert the appearance of escalation control or escalation dominance in the fighting of the war. That's the second part, is the part that's more obvious with the Novitek attack. The Novitek attack came up the Baltic Sea. It did not come overland from Ukrainian territory. That's a distance of more than 900 kilometers, and there's no indication the Ukrainians, though they publicize, especially in the American press, their capability to do that. They didn't. What this was a Baltic Sea attack. That means Germany, Estonia, maybe Latvia, definitely Finland, and maybe Sweden were all involved in the operation of Ukrainian attack drones on the Baltic Sea. That's a significant escalation in the Baltic by those enemy states. And I repeat, Finland is making itself an active war combatant state. It's not just President of Finland, Stubb, President Trump's golfing partner, showing up at last week's meeting with Zelensky in the Oval Office and the other Europeans. It's not just Stubb appearing, Stubb the golfer, the friend of Mr. Trump. It's Finland now acting within an active NATO attack capacity. Now, both those attacks have absolutely no strategic or operational significance in the course of the war. What they are intended to show is that the war can be fought to the defeat of the Russian side and make it appear that the Russian offensive all along the line, contact line in Zaporozhye region, in the north, around Sumy, around Pokrovsk. We don't need to go through all of the details of the tactical, operational, and strategic movement of Russian forces moving west. What the map of those operations tell us is that Russia's winning the war. But let's try to come back a bit, because our colleagues on your program often talk about the war's won. The war Russia has won. You raised the important point. Is there an Oreshnik moment? Is there a decisive final defeat of the other side, of the enemy side? Now, that's really an important point to ask. We have made the point about the Oreshnik moment as a decisive attack that would force the Ukrainians to capitulate. Is there such a moment now? That was your question, yeah? Now, my own view is that the Russian side are playing for time. We explained it last week. We explained it as part of President Putin's effort in Alaska to attempt to verify, without any more vagueness from people like Vitkov or Rubio or any of the other Americans are allegedly reporting to Trump, the decision maker. Without any more doubt, does Trump understand what Russia's war strategy is? Does he understand what the negotiating terms are? Is it possible to negotiate an end of this war with Trump on the basis of indivisible security? That's to say, Ukraine cannot be maintained as a war platform for the future. It cannot be allowed to do that. Now, I don't need to go through it. You've had a number of people talk very carefully about Foreign Minister Lavrov's extensive 54-minute interview with NBC. He said it all. He said it very well. And I'll come back to a couple of things he said in a minute because they go to the Oreshnik moment. What Russia has at the moment is indisputable escalation control. What it understands from the Alaskan meetings with Trump is that if Trump doesn't understand what he heard this time, the man will never understand. Never. Now, the question is, how long will it take for the Russian side to calculate that when Trump says peace, he means war? When Trump says, I'm going to change the name of the Defense Department to the Department of War, when Mrs. Trump presents a letter to President Putin describing the abduction, the crime of abducting children, not exactly, she didn't say it in the letter, but it was intended to say the Russian side is abducting children from the Ukraine. When love of children on the part of the Trump family means pedophilia throughout the higher circles of the US and of Israel. We can come back to that too. The words are always reversed. At what point does the Russian strategy acknowledge that what the American side says is a lie? It means the reverse. Now, the foreign minister, Lavrov, said something very interesting. I'm looking around for the text. During the interview with NBC and having to deal with an NBC correspondent who wasn't listening to what he had to say, and he had to keep telling her, listen to what I'm saying as politely as he could. He said the following, which is very interesting. She asked him, why are you, if you're really interested in peace, why are you bombing the daylights out of civilians in the Ukraine and out of an American factory in the Ukraine? Here's what he said. This is a factory allegedly on the Hungarian border of the Ukraine, so it's in the west. Lavrov said, if you believe that if there is American capital in an enterprise which is used to produce weapons to kill Russians, and you believe that, be it American, be it Hungarian, be it anybody's capital, that this gives impunity to those who build weapons to kill us, I don't think so, says Lavrov. I don't think this is fair. This is a kind of, I would say, imperialism. Now, I've been listening to Mr. Lavrov for many years. I haven't heard him say imperialism to an American for a very long time, if at all. Now, what does he mean? He means that if any of them, the United States, the other NATO allies which we've just mentioned, Estonia in the Baltic Sea, Finland in the Baltic Sea, Finland in the Gulf of Finland, and so on, if the British in the Black Sea, and so on and on and on. If any of them think that putting capital, putting factories, putting weapons into the Ukraine for the killing of Russians in the future is permissible, is negotiable, it's wrong. But Trump used a bigger word, imperialism. Okay? Now, that tells you there is a genuine understanding, not often talked about in TASS or in RIA Novosti, and certainly not in RT, that the Russians running this war understand it's a long war, not a short one, an imperialist war against Russia, And this is its present stage. We've talked about this before, Nima. And many of your colleagues and I entirely agree. We date the beginning of the imperial war against Russia slightly differently. Well, some of our colleagues put it back in 91. I put it back into 1930s. The attempt to destroy the Soviet Union has always been US policy. It's an empire war. Now, you can't fight the empire quickly. There's no Oreshnik moment where you fire one weapon that can decapitate the empire. Not possible. It's an illusion. So, to go back, if Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, articulating very well to an American network what the Russian objectives are, what the Russian negotiating positions are, calls the war imperialism, and warns, don't think that you can have security guarantees, the buildup of a defense establishment, the creation of drone factories to kill Russians for the future. Don't think you can have more war later on the basis of a ceasefire and a meeting with Zelensky now. Impossible. Okay, but if this is an imperialist war, how can there be an end to it? It's by the theory of imperialism is long. The US empire is not about to fold under an Oreshnik. What the Russian side then understands is got to negotiate with the present. The opportunity is that Trump can be made to understand not that he can win the war in the Ukraine, but that he can be protected from not losing the war. This is a chap who, when he says peace, means war. When he says Department of Defense, he's now about to rename it the Department of War. He means not to lose this war. That would be politically disastrous for him, psychologically, as well as politically. For the time being, he can run with this pseudo peace policy, and it's making virtually no difference to his polls. It's not winning him votes, it's not losing him votes. But if he lost the Ukraine, that would be serious. So he's come up with a clever formula. As empires go, it's nothing original. The Romans had it, the Greeks had it. There's nothing original. Byzantines had it. Everyone's tried this. You get the people you protect to pay you to protect them. It's a shakedown, an extortion. It's criminal. It involves bribery and force to make your friends pay you to protect them from you. Okay? It's a shakedown. And Trump has simply brought, with people like Vitkov, Lutnick, Besant, and all their family along with them in the background, the biggest multi-billion-dollar shakedown that's ever been attempted, just in terms of dollars. First, bribery, then various kinds of extortion. And this is the way they don't care whether they win or lose the war, so that they will pay the Ukrainians through the Germans and the Europeans to keep the war going. So to come back to your last question, these are attacks to show capability for long-term war making, which will enrich the Trump family and their associates, will keep the war going, and will be called peace without it being a defeat of the Russians. Now, as Lavrov said, how do we fight that? And he didn't tell NBC how you fight it, but you ask the question, can you fight it by firing an Oreshnik or several Oreshniki? Well, that's a decapitation weapon. It's a very unusual one. It ought to deter the Germans, everyone within range, certainly the Finns, the Estonians, the Latvians, the Germans, and so on. If it doesn't deter them, there's not much point in firing it now. Second, all the targets that are part of the Ukrainian-American war machine, drone manufacture, and so forth, are capable of being struck and destroyed by existing Russian weapons, which are cheaper, and that's what's being used. So the issue of decapitation doesn't arise yet.
John, I don't know if you saw the article in Politico, which says that five wars experts fear, and they're talking about in the next 5 years there may be five wars, and one of them is Russia versus NATO in the Baltics.
Yes.
The first one actually they mentioned, and you look at the list, you see the India versus Pakistan, China and Taiwan, India and China against
Well, that's a nonsense.
and
That's a
North
nonsense.
Korea and South Korea. It
Right.
seems somehow we know that India said no to the United States. They're gonna buy the Russian oil, Russian energy. They don't
Yes.
care about. But when it comes to this sort of list that they're preparing, do you think that we're gonna have somehow? I don't know, how do you see Donald Trump and his administration in this picture that Politico is drawing for us? Is Donald Trump and his administration part of this picture? Because it seems to me that the establishment is seeing some sort of conflict, is after some sort of conflict in these regions.
Well, that's true. I don't know anything at all about Politico. I hardly ever read it. Nobody listening needs to read Politico to understand what the Trump administration is doing. From what you say, they left out the Iran-Israel war, did they? They left out the Arab-Israeli war.
There is
They
nothing of
left
that
out the
sort.
Thai-Cambodian war. Conveniently, they left out all of the so-called wars that Trump calls himself the peacemaker for in order to qualify for the Nobel Peace Prize. Let's put it this way. When empires fight, there are lots of little wars on at the periphery, because the big expensive one can now, with nuclear armaments, destroy everybody. So you have proxy wars and geographically limited platform wars, which is what we've got in the war in Europe against Russia, and that's what it is on the Ukrainian platform. So for the time being, Russia's negotiating strategy is to see if it can create some combination of inducements for the Americans and deterrence for the Americans to pull out of that platform before the Russian side destroys the platform as an active war platform. That hasn't happened quite yet. It's happening slowly. As to the Iran-Israel war, well, we've talked about this, and we understand that it was the Israelis who called for the ceasefire. They had begun to run out of air defense. They needed combination of money, resupply, and so on, and they needed time to rebuild, while Iran also needed the time to rebuild, to reconfigure its defenses in cooperation with Russia in particular. So we've also talked about the way in which that could spill out into Azerbaijan and Armenia, but there's no end to it. Whether we go to the Balkans and look at the war that's being stimulated, and not hardly for the first time, between Serbia and the Kosovars, we go then to the Far East and take a look at the pressure on China, and let's not forget that as a preliminary to actual ground fighting or war fighting, you have economic warfare, and that's very active between, as you said. we have a list of wars. And what we think is that the Pentagon's Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Elbridge Colby, has, along with his business partner, spelled out a system or a sequencing of wars so the US can profit from each one at a time, but not overextend its capacity to fight. Because the principle is make money as long as we can, but never show that we can lose. So we got a sequence from a Colby point of view, our commitments. So we always appear to be winning because that's part of our extortion racket. You can't shake down people who are no longer afraid of you. If a combination of Russian, Indian, and Chinese, Iranian, and Yemeni air defense proved that it was far more capable at a cheaper price than the so-called Patriot system, on which Israel and the United States relies, and endlessly Trump broadcasts how valuable the Patriot is, who will buy it? An empire can't extort from people except from fear. That's how it works. And for the time being, Trump appears to think and be persuaded he's a success at this extortion. And he and his sidekicks at extortion, his collectors, his consigliere in mafia gang terms, Vitkov and Lutnick and Besant, these people have been very busy and they are lying their heads off as to their success. But that's what you do if you're a bribe collector. You say we extracted big concessions from Putin. We didn't fail. We didn't lose. We're not losing this war. We're winning. Well, what they mean is our back pocket's winning.
John, J.D. Vance in his latest interview said that he feels that the war in Ukraine will continue at least for the next 6 months. But do you feel that we're going to have new conflicts in the Baltics? I'm not talking about the current situation.
Right.
Some sort of escalation happening while having the conflict in Ukraine. It somehow would be some sort of escalation that we've never seen before. You know,
well, the
are we
Russians
heading toward that moment?
No, I think that we've had an escalation. After all, the attack on the Nord Stream pipeline was a combined NATO-Ukrainian operation. And the German prosecutors chasing Ukrainian bad guys as the culprits is partly diversion and partly true. The only loser in such a new form of German fabrication is Seymour Hersh, who made a substantial fortune telling a different story. Okay. The Baltic has been an active war zone from a Polish point of view, a German point of view, a Finnish point of view, a NATO point of view. They exercise with aggressive scenarios all the time. And you and your colleagues have referred to those statements by a general whose name, a U.S. general whose name I've forgotten, suggesting that one of the scenarios would be to take out Kaliningrad, if I'm not mistaken. This sort of aggressive talk associated with constant exercising of aggressive intentions, plus German and other troop deployments in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and increased NATO commitments to arming those states means action. And yes, it's an escalation. And yes, the Russian side see it. And what would be sensible? I mean, I know a lot of folks want to come listen to this podcast and go away and think our side's winning and it's all going to be over in a few months. And it isn't going. Empire war is beyond our lifetime. Okay, empire war takes a very long time, and politicians, our leaders, even those we trust, there aren't too many of those, let's say, understand and can't readily ask a country to sacrifice for such long-term future. The normal thing is to say, we will handle that conflict. We will tie off that conflict. And from a Russian point of view, there's still this underlying view that Trump can be deterred from losing. And if he can understand, he can be given some PR wins in order to exchange them for bribes. Now, look, why is the Russian view on that at all different from the Western one? We've just seen the Korean president, what's his name? Lee Jae-myung, just was in the White House this week. It was a marvelous exercise of bribery. I mean, there he go. This is a relatively new president who faces a Trumpian extortion threat in tweet just before he arrives. And what does he announce? I've got the papers here. I'm looking them up. He announces a $30 billion, if I'm not mistaken, purchase from Korean Air to Boeing. Okay, normal commission of the Vitkov kind, the Lutnick kinds, 3%. Mr. 3%, 3% on 30 billions, 1 billion, if my arithmetic's right. There's a hell of a lot of money the Koreans just laid out for the Americans. And it's all to make Trump happy with not losing. So if the Koreans can do it, why shouldn't everybody do it? Well, the answer is the Russians can do it, but the Canadians can't. Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, who fought an election, won a party, won an election, won power in Canada, and fighting for Canadian sovereignty against Trump, folds on every issue. The man's a liar. The man proves that some vassal states don't learn the Korean lesson. Okay, what can Carney bribe the United States with? He drops retaliatory tariffs, and the Canadian get paid back by Trump, who says, "I like Mr. Carney." This is really very limited displays of different countries reaching different views about how to cope with Trump-level shakedown and extortion. Have I answered the question? Each one of these Baltic states is going to do the same thing, some more successful than others. Does it make a difference to Russian strategy? No, not really, because we've heard from Lavrov. We're facing the empire, he says. If you think you can put a Ukrainian drone factory or a drone base on a Finnish shore, an Estonian shore, and then launch them against us, we'll come after you. Sooner or later, we will hit you. And your Article 5 NATO protection won't be there when we do. But you can't say that. I mean, it's easy on a podcast we say it. The Russians don't have to say it.
Yeah. Donald Trump was talking about denuclearization, and he's bringing in Russia and China. I don't know, in the current situation that we're in, the United States would be able to even talk about these things. They're fighting literally against China, India, Brazil, name it, everybody. And they're fighting a war against Russia in Ukraine. And he's talking about denuclearization. Do you think that he's preparing? He wants to do something to prepare for that moment to talk about it, or he's just throwing something out and he doesn't care about it? Before going to your response, here is what Donald Trump said.
Okay.
Right?
Trying to do with Russia and with China is denuclearization. And it's very important. One of the things I discussed with President Putin the other day, it wasn't just that, it was also other things. And I think the denuclearization is it's a big aim, but Russia's willing to do it, and I think China's going to be willing to do it too. We can't let nuclear weapons proliferate. We have to stop nuclear weapons. The power is too great.
Can I clarify? Is that what he was saying at the meeting with the South Korean president on
Yeah.
Monday?
Yeah.
Okay. Look, I hope everybody can see what this man is capable of and what he's not capable of. He got that. Look, do we have to remember so carefully? A few weeks ago, he had ceasefire in his head. Ceasefire. Then he came to the notion after Alaska of security guarantees and a peace agreement. Better than a ceasefire. Peace agreement with security guarantees. Okay, he got that phrase in his head. Then he met Merz, who kept saying ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire. And Zelensky, who insisted, you got to meet me. Putin's got to meet me. So Trump says there's got to be a meeting between Putin and Zelensky, and maybe I'll come if they want me to, because I'm needed. So he's got that in his head. This man's capable of one phrase, one slogan at a time. Now, what he meant in the South Korean president meeting was denuclearization of North Korea. It's okay. He's not talking about denuclearization of the United States forces in Japan, South Korea, and surrounding China. And he's not really ready for nuclear disarmament talks of a strategic kind with China and with Russia. There's nothing on the table. Let's just go back. I mean, the man's got a simple slogan in his head. Let's go back to what Lavrov said to NBC. You say, he said, you want President Putin to meet Mr. Zelensky, the de facto ruler of the regime. Okay, we've said, that's terrific. We'll do that. But two qualifications. One is, got to have some clear understanding of what we're going to agree. We know Mr. Zelensky's a good actor. We know he likes plays. You know, he can jump around with various organs on pianos, but we've got to prepare. So Lavrov reminds that at the last Istanbul round, it was agreed 3 working groups. Lavrov repeated it with Rubio: military, diplomatic, humanitarian. And day before yesterday, he reminded NBC, not that that woman's capable of remembering, that there hasn't been any agreement on working groups to finalize the terms of agreement that the 2 presidents can have. So there's nothing moving there. What about Korea then? Well, let me read you what the most serious Asian policy maker, the most serious, clearest one, had to say from the DPRK, the North Korea. This is Kim Jong-un. That's the sister of the leader of North Korea. She's the toughest, clearest articulation of Korean policy. She said, I'm sorry, Kim Yo-jong, I think. Yes, Kim Yo-jong is the sister. Kim Jong-un is her brother. She says, Lee Jae-myung is not the sort of man who will change the course of history. She called South Korea a faithful dog of Washington, accused Lee of speaking gibberish, and said his government maintains, quotes, a stinking confrontational nature swathed in a wrapper of peace. Now, she didn't say that about Trump, but the meaning applies. The denuclearization slogan that you heard Trump say in front of the South Korean president is the slogan he got in his head for the basis of making peace, he thinks, between South Korea and North Korea. Only it's not on. Not on. It's a stinking confrontational nature swathed in a wrapper of peace. Well, that just about describes everything. Who in our audience doesn't agree that describes everything Trump offers on all of those warfare fronts? Does anyone out there think It's not a stinking confrontation in a wrapper of peace.
John, do you think that Donald Trump, you said that ceasefire somehow disappeared from the rhetoric on the part of
Yes.
the US president and his administration? How about the meeting with Zelensky? Who's Zelensky? Do you think that we saw the response of the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov? He said that they're not gonna. They consider Zelensky as de facto president of
Yes. Yes. I'm
Ukraine.
looking around for his speech. Yes.
Yeah,
That's what he said.
yeah, but there, he said some sort of he put out some sort of preconditions before going to that meeting, which
Yes.
I believe none of those conditions would be accepted on the part of Zelensky and the people who are backing him.
I agree with you. Yes.
So it seems that it does that mean that the meeting would never happen and Donald Trump can do nothing about it because Zelensky is pushing for that. The Europeans are supporting Zelensky, and Russia is not interested in that. I don't know. Is Donald Trump going to give up on what he was asking for?
Well, I think you characterize it exactly correctly. The question really is, there was a ceasefire as a tripwire. The Europeans and Zelensky expected Russia to say no for the rather obvious reasons. And they said, we can only discuss in preparation for agreement on terms. There can't be a ceasefire without agreement on a peace agreement. Otherwise, ceasefires, even Trump got that message. So the tripwire that was created to keep the war going, but make it look as if Putin is responsible for blocking, was ceasefire. That's gone, even though Merz kept trying it last Monday. Now, the idea of a meeting with Zelensky has been agreed to by Putin, so long as it's prepared. But there's no sign of any preparation or even agreement on preparation, which brings us back into the circle of what are the terms, the 22 terms that General Kellogg agreed with the European states, and the 33 points the Russian side agreed in Istanbul or tabled, and then they've been broken down and shortened and made simpler and put in a sequence. All of these things make the tripwire no longer trip anything. So then you get to the question you asked: what's J.D. Vance mean by a war that continues for 6 months? What's he going to do about it if it continues? Well, we've heard Trump say, look, 2 or 3 weeks here, 2 or 3 weeks there, then we get serious. This is back to the threats of the Lindsey Graham stone-crushing, Stone Age sanctions against China, India, and the United States, and so on and so on. I'm not at loss for words. I'm simply saying they are lost for words. They keep repeating formulae in order to keep the war going, so that no one is seen to lose the war, and those running the war keep making a profit. The people who lose the war are the Ukrainians who lose their lives, the Russians who lose their lives. They're the losers of this war. But the tripwires are no longer even credible tripwires. But let's go back to another problem. And that's why we're here making a podcast. We think the evidence says Russia has won the war, that the Ukraine platform has been destroyed as a future platform for attacking Russia, that Russia has finally, after the 2014 coup, after the civil war in the Ukraine, destroyed more than 18,000 Donbass lives and so forth. after all of that, Russia has finally, using the formula of a special military operation, destroyed that capability. In the process, showed it can destroy any weapon US and NATO can field. All right, that's what we think we've arrived at. But the other side daily tells its constituents they're winning the war. And that's where we came in, isn't it? We came in with a Saratov drone attack and an Ust-Luga Novatek drone attack. The other side keeps saying, we've got a game changer. The Ukrainians can build their Flamingo. And the Russian side says, and this is a source told me, so the clever Hochli have managed to make Aggregate 4. Aggregate 4 was the Hitler's V2 long-range rocket. The Russians have contempt, serious contempt, professional contempt, for what the Ukrainians call their Flamingo, their 2,000-kilometer drone attack. So the Russian side is confident it can maintain escalation control, but they can't win a propaganda war. So here we are trying to deal with the other side says we're winning. We say you're losing. The facts on the ground show that. The other side says there are new facts on the ground. Then the other side says President Trump is really going to pull the final pressure on Putin to force concessions, and so on we go. This doesn't make happy podcasting. It doesn't make happy audiences. It's simply a way of us saying, when words mean the reverse of the facts, and the reverse of the facts are politically not unanimous in the NATO countries. Who doesn't believe Novichok is an evil Russian chemical warfare weapon that was used against poor Navalny and poor Skripal and poor Dawn Sturgis in England? Who doesn't believe that? Well, there are about a dozen of us who've spent all these years proving that it didn't happen, but we don't count. The word Novichok means Putin kills. And it's not a shame. It's not a political failure for the Russian side, the Chinese side, the Indian side, the Brazilian, South African, the alliance with Iran and DPRK. It's not our failure that the world doesn't believe us. It's that world doesn't count. It can't inflict its warfare any longer. That's what the Russian war shows. Even the Houthis show they can destroy two major ports in Israel, Ashkelon and Eilat. Yes, they don't hit Ben Gurion Airport every time they launch. Maybe they make a hole that's easy to repair. But even a tiny group of Arabs like that in Yemen, under immense British, American, and Israeli attack, can inflict a scale of damage against an enemy way beyond anyone's capability to imagine. All right, so the propaganda war is being won on both sides, but it doesn't count. Force counts. Money counts. And sooner or later, the alliance of the Russia, China, India will be able to prove that the shakedown is a very short-term bribery operation, big by American standards, but no more successful than the Biden use of bribery and arms and so forth on the platform. So I'm trying to say something that might be realistically optimistic for our audience, at the same time as we've got to accept that whatever we say, the other side will turn into reverse.
John, I think something when you talk about denuclearization is related to what's going on in North Korea, is about North
Yes.
Korea. I think Russia would wouldn't agree with Donald Trump to go in North Korea, because North Korea is somehow some sort of balance for Russia to go, because Russia against the United States, North Korea against Europe, S- some sort of balance in terms of nuclear weapons. You know what I'm talking about. Russia brought in North Korea to somehow have a nuclear weapon state to be part of the deal, a strategic deal between the two countries. It's so much important for Russia, for the future of what's going on in that region. And Donald Trump talking about denuclearization, he's not talking about Europeans at all. He's talking
No.
about the United States together with Russia. Russia agreed on Russia. We haven't heard anything, as I know, about Vladimir Putin talking about denuclearization, any sort of talk that could have happened during the last 6 months. We haven't heard anything about it.
There's
And
been nothing. No.
yeah, and he's somehow arguing that Putin agreed on that. And do you feel that Russia, how does Russia see if Donald Trump goes in that direction to Kim Jong Un to talk about nuclear weapons?
Uh, pardon me. It seems to me long established Russian policy is to be concerned with nuclear war conflicts on its borders, because the radiation blows across the line, doesn't it? Russia's never been happy with the proliferation of nuclear weapons in India and Pakistan. It's not happy with the proliferation of Israeli nuclear weapons approaching Iran. It's therefore taken the view that a more protective view of Iran now than before, that there might be a basis for maintaining an Iranian nuclear program without nuclear weapons. That's been Putin's line, and we can argue about it, but maybe now isn't the time. With respect to the North Koreans, they've graduated, and once they've graduated, they also have the capability of delivery systems, very long range ones. They can hit the United States now, and they can certainly face Japan if Japan becomes even more of a warfighting platform, as the Trump administration aims to do, and if South Korea continues to be the warfighting platform. Let's bear in mind what Trump has already been threatening to do. He wants to buy the territory of US bases on South Korean territory. That's why the North Koreans have said, why Kim Yo-jong has said there's nothing much to Mr. Lee's bribery. He still faces an expansion of the South Korean platform. So from a Russian point of view, denuclearization can only be indivisible. Everybody or nobody at all. Everybody in each of these balances you just mentioned, Nima, have to act towards each other so that they are mutual. The mutual security is assured. I don't think I'm explaining anything very complicated here. So to the extent that the Americans have no intention whatever of reaching a genuine accommodation between South Korea and North Korea, the denuclearization is just a new slogan in Trump's head. Therefore, the Russian attitude is not to insult Trump, not to say anything like I'm saying, not to show, quotes, disrespect for Trump, instead to support the notion that he needs to be edged along in the direction of being afraid of losing another war. And if he wants to claim credit for phony peace between Thailand and Cambodia or Congo and Rwanda, let him, because it's fake. What's not fake is the conflict between a nuclear armed power like Israel and Iran and all the other ones we're talking about. So we're not, I suppose, I urge us all not to talk around in a circle, to accept that the words have lost their meaning. And the president who doesn't most of the time understand the meaning of the words he uses. And if you accompany that with some accomplished criminals, extortion artists like Stephen Witkoff and Howard Lutnick, these are extortion artists. These are bribe takers, and therefore they lie their heads off. The question is, if you bribe them, this is to get a little away from your question, suppose you bribe them, which is what Pakistan's done. And that's the job of Kirill Dmitriev, the special emissary for economic relations with the United States. It's his job to hang bribes, much as the South Korean president just hung a bribe through Boeing. The Russian side's come up with something similar. The problem with the Americans, this is a serious problem, is they take the bribes, but then they don't deliver. The Russian side knew that about Hillary Clinton. I told that story before here, where she took the bribe, multi-millions, to make sure that GM would sell Opel to a combination of Germany and Russia. And she took the money and then reneged on the deal. And so there's a particular method of Russian bribe taking that makes sure that the other side delivers. And it's not just the money, it's the fear. I'm not going to say any more detail about the Russian method of paying bribes and making sure the other side delivers, because the Russian side's fundamentally learned you can bribe Americans, but they don't deliver. So how to make them deliver now? So if the Koreans say they'll put more, they will build more ships, they will buy more planes, they will increase their, Hyundai will invest several $100 million in the United States. They're going to stick their money in the United States' hands and hope for the best. Well, I don't think the Chinese and the Indians and the Russians are in a position to say we hope for the best, because hoping for the best isn't an approach you take with an empire fighting a war. And maybe it's not the right moment, but we began with this idea that Trump floated at his meeting with the president of Korea of renaming the Pentagon. Why does that matter? Why does it matter? Well, let me tell you, I used to work in one of in the old executive office building. That was this beautiful 19th century wedding cake style building next to the White House was the old Department of War. That's where the original U.S. empire expanded by war in the Caribbean and in the Philippines. And it has beautiful offices at each corner of the building, which were viciously fought over by officials of an incoming administration because they are so grand, the ceiling's tall, they're beautiful views. I've also been in the old Ministry of War in London. The Ministry of War in London, is now the Royal Auto Club. The Royal Automobile Club on Pall Mall is or was the Ministry of War that fought the British Boer War, for example. Of course, these are beautiful buildings. Believe me. What does beautiful building have to do with a Ministry of War office? Answer. people love war. These are people who want to profit from war. They want to decorate their curtains with gold and their corner views. This is the way. When you rename something the Ministry of War, not the Ministry of Defense, you are celebrating war. And people don't do that. I mean, boys and people who read, teenagers or little kids who play video games can celebrate a war of that kind. But serious war lovers want to make money and they don't want to die. So you have these buildings called the Ministry of War. Well, that's such a symbol that we have to take seriously when Trump explains how we won World War I, we won World War II. It's wrong to call the Pentagon the Department of Defense. It's the Department of War. But why? Because we're going to win all the next ones. These people have to be understood as loving war and enjoying them. Very cushy armchairs in those offices they want to rename.
Thank you so much, John, for being with us today. Great
Thank you
pleasure
for
as always.
Thank you for having me, Nima.